Yeah, well then, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your kind invitation. It's always a real pleasure to rejoin the ranks of Frog. So let's talk about video essays as a possible new form of game critique. In the recent past, various authors have examined the change of tone or tonality within games journalism. There is a broader portfolio of topics which is covered by representatives of the so-called classic games press, meaning here former and current print game magazines and their online outlets. The medium itself is getting more and more attention beyond the circles of a tech-savvy, service-oriented trade and specialized press. General press, especially editors of art sections, started to treat digital games as objects of cultural and public interest. Computer games have become newsworthy. They generate billions and billions in revenue, and the well-known discourses about gaming violence, as well as gaming addiction, are still out there. But digital games are getting also more editorial space because journalists increasingly understand them as complex pop cultural products that bring forth contrasts, tensions, and paradox situations that can be read as meta-medial and political comments. In the following minutes, I shall talk about one of the younger forms of public reflection about computer and video games, the so-called video game essay. Media researcher Erlend Lavik explains this shape of criticism. Film criticism is a sweeping concept ranging from amateur blogs to newspaper reviews to dense scholarly studies. The genre of the video essay commonly employs edited footage from the films under analysis in order to enrich and expand the function of criticism, to shed light on individual films, groups of films, or the cinema as an art form. Now, obviously, Lavik is talking about film and television criticism, but let us perform a magic trick. Let us replace some of his keywords and key terms. Let's hear it again, shall we? Digital game criticism is a sweeping concept. The genre of the video essay commonly employs edited footage from the games under analysis in order to enrich and expand the function of criticism, to shed light on individual games, groups of games, or gaming as an art form. To sum things up for now, video game essays have been influenced by video essays about film and television in their form and language. It was not until 2007 that videographic work resembling the form that we now know began to take shape. Around this time, Kevin B. Lee started posting excerpts of films online, which evolved into videos with an essayistic character. Video essays are short videos themselves. They present viewpoints and arguments about movies, TV shows, games, literature by using source footage, sequences, or still shots, voice-over commentaries, and sub or intertitles. They got off the ground with the development of high-performance hardware and powerful video editing software, including an end-user-friendly price. Being able to edit digital source material and reconfigure it into a new narrative timeline about the interplays of aesthetic, cultural, and economic aspects has opened up a new pathway. Curators can express and form opinions with an opportunity to augment and perhaps even decenter the dominance of text-based criticism. Having finalized their cut, practitioners, curators, scholars, and teachers alike who want to present their recent videographic work have to think about the next step. This is where the question of distribution comes into play. Without the online platforms such as YouTube, Vimeo, or Fandor on the one hand, and the cost-efficient as well as fast data access infrastructure, especially on mobile phones, it would be barely possible for visual storytellers to explore new forms, gather new audiences, and build new careers. Now, when it comes to the specifics of the content creators want to show to their online audience, there is a third keyword after production and distribution that is relevant in the process of manufacturing video essays. It's called copyright. This term involves a legal challenge that is relevant to video essay makers on two levels: getting as well as editing their source material and distributing it to a public audience. This talk cannot measure out all the different legal implications that are interconnected to the circumstances. It is therefore an acceptable conclusion, I think, at this point to summarize the legal melange for video essay makers and producers as a grayish area between the willingness to express oneself and possible copyright strikes of certain stakeholders and third parties involved. Games as Literature is a US-based YouTube channel with almost 35K subscribers and 180 videos online that started broadcasting 5 years ago. The channel's protagonist introduces himself as the game professor. Following a familiar word association, his visual setup is placing him in a huge chair in front of a large greenboard full of chalk notes. His clothing style can be described as rather conservative with a twist. The game professor is wearing a rather dark jacket with a striking colorful tie, which features an 8-bit retro look. The game professor's main intention can be looked up on his crowdfunding website. He wants, and I quote, to create an actual curriculum, a real way for schools to teach kids how to appreciate and interpret video games. In the meantime, not me, but him, I'm contributing what I can to the discourse of interactive narrative study through this web series. In short, I want to play a part in improving the understanding and presence of video game in the academic space, end quote. Content-wise, the game professor is claiming to offer several perspectives and approaches. And I quote, "What is games as literature 101? It's a variety of different things. Sometimes it's a game review series with brief discussions about whatever games I've been playing lately. Sometimes it's a look into specific topics, like how a certain video game tells a story or what's going on in video game culture. But most importantly, it's occasional in-depth examination of a particular video game, what it means and how it uses its interactive properties to tell a story," end quote. As the name of the channel already is suggesting, the game professor's understanding of digital games is that of a text, implying hereby that video and computer games can be read and understood with the right amount of gaming literacy. The game professor is also very active on Twitter, where he not only promotes his channel, but also appears as an outspoken political discourse participant, showing a strong anti-Trump mindset. He also frequently is discussing topics such as the interlinks between religion and sexuality. It can be assumed that the creator behind the persona, the game professor, is combining this strong and outspoken social media game with his YouTube appearance. On his channel, he also deep dives into topics such as female agency, and is deconstructing the right-wing slogan, "Keep politics out of games." I want to discuss the aforementioned problem complex as part of a larger complex. This complex can be read and labeled as a subset of a new form of culture war. This iteration, following Irene Tavis Thompson, is to be understood as, and I quote, "an outgrowth of characteristically American culture patterns. Like earlier cultural politics, the contemporary culture wars take place within the parameters of some enduring cultural patterns," end quote. Thompson continues, "If the contemporary culture war differ from those of the past, it is only because we have become increasingly aware, increasingly aware of such contention and increasingly conscious of the instability with which all cultural ideas are held," end quote. Her argument was published back in 2010, and I will underline now, a decade later, the awareness Thompson is talking about has to be recontextualized within the current ecosystem of social media. Since most of the video game essayists can be found on YouTube, the platform can serve as a point of reference here. Already in 2010, YouTube stated that the number of videos watched at the website has broken the 2 billion mark. 2 billion mark. 9 years later, though, YouTube has 2 billion users worldwide. 79% of internet users claim to have a YouTube account. They can browse YouTube in 80 different languages, which covers roughly 95% of the internet population. And every single day, people watch 1 billion hours of videos on the platform, hereby generating billions of views. It would take you close to 82 years to watch the amount of videos uploaded to YouTube in only 1 hour. It is this specific discourse area where video game essay creators quickly will find themselves right in the middle of accusations, allegations, and aggressions from viewers as well as other video makers. The most prominent example is Anita Sarkeesian and her highly successful video game essay series Tropes versus Women in Video Games, in which Sarkeesian aimed to, and I quote, "to examine the plot devices and patterns most often associated with female characters in gaming from a systemic big picture perspective," end quote. After her fundraising campaign to raise money in order to produce her web series, she began to receive death threats, comments on her gender and race, and on Wikipedia, someone replaced her picture with a pornographic one. Additionally, rape threats were made against her. Her case, then, for me, is a clear and vivid reminder that participatory culture can as easily serve non-democratic as democratic purposes. Her harassment utilized the same platforms that encourage the sharing of remixes, videos, games, memes, tweets, blog posts, and so on. So my conclusion starts with the same semantic trick from the beginning. And I quote, "In the past decade, video game essays have taken on several roles of traditional written game criticism, from advocating for certain games or game makers and expressing enthusiasm for recent games to what counted as long-form criticism, like discussing genre or the role of sound. There is now an audiovisual take to be found on most, if not all, ludophile topics and buzzwords." In summary, this talk has argued that video game essays today are a part of media criticism. Broadly translated, the findings indicate that these essays are in multidimensional expressions and manifestations of artistic ambition, journalistic curiosity, as well as academic receptiveness. Future research on aesthetic, formal, and rhetorical strategies for communicating in the medium of video might bring new insights. It's a powerful platform for examining critical and analytical ideas with the discourse field of digital games. In conclusion, video game essay creators, it would appear, have understood that it's not easier to write effectively with video than it is to compose an essay with pen and paper. Similar types of expository and argumentative planning are involved in both forms. new technology introduces its own characteristic challenges and choices. Here, we look at decisions about the spatial as well as temporal organization and transformation of audiovisual materials, plus the very addition of on-screen text, voice-over commentary, and visual effects. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there are some minutes left, no, they're not, I think. We're over, yes.
Unfortunately, I have a question. I will leave it in the chat a little bit later. And thank you a lot for your presentation. There are many ways it can go in the future. I mean, game journalism and video game essays.